The massive alien ship appeared in Earth's sky without warning. It was 3 times larger than anything humans had ever built, with smooth silver walls that seemed to bend light around them. The ship hung above New York City like a giant metal cloud, casting shadows on the streets below. Dr. Kim Tae-ho stood at the window of the United Nations building, watching the alien vessel with calm eyes. He was a tall man with graying hair and steady hands that never shook, even when he was looking at technology that should have been impossible. Next to him, Captain Park Mina checked her communication device for the 5th time in 10 minutes. "They want to talk?" Mina said. The message came through on every radio frequency at once. Perfect English, too. Tae-ho nodded slowly. Interesting choice. They could have used mathematics or pictures, but they chose our language. What does that tell you? That they have been watching us for a while. The alien message had been simple and polite. They called themselves the Zenthari Empire. They said they came in peace. They wanted to meet with Earth's leaders to discuss joining something called the Galactic Council. The message made it sound like getting an invitation to a very exclusive club. But Tae-ho had spent 30 years studying physics, and something about their ship bothered him. The energy readings were all wrong. The ship was using far too much power for what it was doing. It was like watching someone use a sledgehammer to crack an egg. The meeting was set for the next day. The humans chose a team of 6 people. Tae-ho would lead the science team. Mina would handle military matters. Lee Dong-woo was their best engineer, a short man with quick fingers who could take apart any machine and put it back together better than before. Dr. Choi Hye-jin knew 12 languages and could read people's faces like books. Yoon Jae-sung understood materials and manufacturing. Dr. Han So-young was their quantum physics expert, barely 30 years old but already smarter than most professors. The aliens landed their smaller ship in Central Park. It was still huge, about the size of a football field, but it seemed tiny compared to the mothership overhead. The grass around it turned brown where strange energy touched the ground. Ambassador Kale stepped out first. He looked almost human, except his skin had a blue tint and his eyes were solid black. He wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid, metal. Behind him came 5 other aliens, each one looking slightly different but all clearly from the same species. "Greetings, people of Earth," Kale said. His voice was deep and smooth. "I am Ambassador Kale of the Zenthari Empire. We come to welcome you to the greater galaxy." Tae-ho stepped forward. "I am Dr. Kim Tae-ho. We thank you for coming so far to meet us." Kale smiled, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. "Not far at all by our standards. Our ship can travel between stars in days. Would you like to see?" The ambassador gestured, and suddenly the air above them shimmered. A 3-dimensional image appeared, showing their journey from a distant star system. The ship seemed to fold space around itself, jumping impossible distances in the blink of an eye. Most of the humans gasped. Dong-woo leaned forward, studying the image carefully. So-young tilted her head like she was solving a math problem in her mind. "Fascinating," Tae-ho said. "May I ask how the spatial distortion matrix maintains stability during the fold transition?" Kyle blinked. That was not the reaction he expected. Usually primitive species either fell to their knees in worship or ran away screaming. They did not ask technical questions using proper scientific terms. What did you say?" "The way you bend space," Tae-ho said patiently. "How do you keep it from snapping back? The energy required to maintain that kind of distortion should tear your ship apart." Dong-woo nodded. "And the power source. You would need something generating at least 10 to the 15th watts continuously. That is more energy than our sun produces." So-young spoke up quietly. "Unless you are using a quantum cascade method. But that would be terribly inefficient." The aliens looked at each other. Kale's smile became strained. This was not going according to plan. "Perhaps we should discuss these matters later," Kale said. "First, let us talk about Earth joining the Galactic Council. There are many benefits: technology, trade, protection from hostile forces." "Protection from what?" Mina asked. Her hand rested casually near her weapon. The galaxy can be dangerous for young species. There are those who would take advantage of your innocence. Under our guidance, you can avoid such threats. Hee-Jin watched the ambassador's face as he spoke. She had learned to read micro-expressions, the tiny movements people made when they were not telling the whole truth. Kale was hiding something. "How many species are in this council?" she asked. 743, at last count. All peaceful, all working together for the good of the galaxy. And how many refused to join? Kale's pause was just a fraction of a second too long. Very few species refuse the benefits of membership. That was not what I asked. The ambassador's aide, a thin alien with green skin, whispered something in Kale's ear. The ambassador nodded and turned back to the humans. "Perhaps you would like to see our ship? We have technologies that might interest your scientists." Taeho looked at his team. Each of them gave him a small nod. "We would be honored," he said. As they walked toward the alien ship, Dongwu fell into step beside Taeho. "Their energy readings are all wrong," he whispered. "I noticed. They are using brute force where they should be using elegance. It is like they learned to build warp drives without understanding the basic principles. Or, So Young said quietly from behind them, they stole the technology from someone else." The alien ship's interior was impressive. Smooth walls glowed with soft light. The air tasted of ozone and something else. Something metallic. Everything looked advanced and alien. Exactly what humans expected from a star-traveling civilization. But Taeho noticed that the control panels were clunky. The energy conduits were too thick. The whole ship felt like it was overbuilt, like someone had designed it without really understanding how it worked. "This is our standard diplomatic vessel," Kale said, leading them through corridors that hummed with power. "Built using technology perfected over millions of years." "Millions?" Jae-sung asked, running his hand along a wall panel. "This alloy composition suggests much more recent development, maybe a few thousand years at most." Another pause from Kale. Another glance at his aide. "You have impressive observational skills," the ambassador said. They ended the tour in what Kale called the technical demonstration chamber. It was a large room with a holographic display in the center. The aliens showed them images of great cities on distant worlds, massive space stations, fleets of ships that could move between galaxies. "All of this could be yours," Kale said. "With our guidance, Earth could become a valued member of the galactic community." "What would be required of us?" Mina asked. "Nothing too difficult. You would need to accept certain limitations, restrictions on military development, guidelines for technological research, standard procedures for new member species." Hee-Jin and Mina exchanged glances. It sounded less like an invitation and more like a list of demands. "We will need time to discuss this with our leaders," Taeho said. "Of course, but please do not take too long. There are pressures in the galaxy. Species that move too slowly sometimes find their options limited." As they left the alien ship, none of the humans spoke until they were back in the UN building. Then Dongwu turned to the others. "Did anyone else notice that their technology is impressive but not elegant? Like they copied it without understanding it?" So Young agreed. Taeho looked out the window at the alien ship in the sky. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to be very careful about our next move." The next morning, Ambassador Kale contacted the human team with a new proposal. He wanted to conduct what he called a technological assessment. This was standard procedure, he explained, for all species applying to join the Galactic Council. "Think of it as an entrance exam," Kale said during their video call. His blue face filled the screen in the UN conference room. "We need to understand your species' capabilities before we can determine your role in the galactic community." Taeho sat at the head of the table, with his team arranged around him. "What does this assessment involve?" "Nothing too difficult. We will present you with a piece of technology. Your task is simply to identify its function and explain how it works. Most species find it quite educational." Mina leaned forward. "And if we fail this test, Kale's smile was cold. Failure is not uncommon. Species that are not ready for advanced technology often need more time to develop. Centuries sometimes. But do not worry. We are very patient teachers. After the call ended, the human team gathered, in their secure briefing room. Jae-sung pulled up files on his tablet. I did some research, he said. The Xanthari have made contact with 47 species in the last 1,000 years. Only 12 passed their assessment on the first try. What happened to the others? Yijin asked. They became what the Xanthari call protected species. Basically, they get treated like children. No independent space travel, no advanced weapons, no unsupervised research. So Young frowned. It sounds like a way to keep potential competitors under control. That is exactly what it is, Mina said grimly. The question is, what do we do about it? Taeho was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. We take their test, and we pass it so well that they never question our capabilities again. The assessment was scheduled for that afternoon. The aliens brought a small device to the UN building. It was about the size of a briefcase, made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols glowed along its edges. Ambassador Kale placed the device on the conference table with ceremony. This is a standard piece of Xanthari technology. Nothing too advanced, but beyond what most young species can comprehend. You have 1 hour to examine it and tell us what it does. His aide, the green-skinned alien named Voss, activated a recording device. For the official record, he explained. Most of Kale's team looked bored. They had done this dozens of times before. Usually the primitive species spent the entire hour poking at the device randomly, then made wild guesses about its function. Sometimes they worshipped it. Once a species had tried to eat it, but the humans were different from the start. Taeho approached the device carefully, not touching it. He walked around the table, examining it from every angle. Then he nodded to his team. Dongwoo, can you get energy readings? The engineer pulled a small scanner from his pocket. Definitely some kind of power source, very compact. The energy signature is interesting. How so? It is not nuclear, not chemical, not even antimatter. It is something else entirely. So Young knelt down to look at the device from below. The symbols are not random. They follow a mathematical pattern. Base 12, I think. That makes sense, Jae-sung said, leaning closer. Base 12 mathematics are more efficient for certain types of calculations. Hyejin studied the symbols. These are not letters. They are formulas. Each symbol represents a different physical constant. Taeho nodded slowly. So this device is showing us the mathematical relationships that make it work. Exactly. And if these formulas are correct? So Young pulled out a tablet and started typing rapidly. Yes, this is definitely a spatial distortion matrix. Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It had been 17 minutes. 17 minutes. And the humans had identified the device's basic function. Most species never figured that out at all. But look at this, Dongwoo said, pointing at a cluster of symbols near the center. This coefficient is all wrong. They are trying to create a stable warp field, but they are doing it the hard way. What do you mean? Taeho asked. They are using massive amounts of energy to brute force the space distortion, but if you approach it from a quantum mechanical perspective, you can achieve the same effect with 90% less power. So Young looked up from her calculations. He is right. They are treating space like a solid object that needs to be pushed out of the way. But space is more like water. If you know how to work with its natural currents, you can move through it much more easily. Jae-sung ran his fingers along the device's edge. The materials are interesting too. This alloy is designed to contain enormous energy fields, but a properly designed quantum matrix would not need such heavy containment. So what exactly does this device do? Taeho asked. It is a warp core component, Dongwoo said confidently. Specifically the spatial distortion generator for faster-than-light travel. But it is an old design, primitive even. Primitive? Kyle's voice cracked slightly. Well, not primitive exactly, So Young said politely. But it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how space-time actually works. Whoever built this learned to make warp drives without really understanding the underlying physics. Like learning to build a car by copying someone else's design without understanding combustion engines, Jae-sung added. Voss, the aide, had gone very pale. His green skin now looked almost white. Tae-ho looked at his watch. We still have 43 minutes left. Would you like us to explain how we would improve this design? That will not be necessary, Kale stammered. But Dongwoo was already sketching on his tablet. The key is to use dimensional folding instead of spatial displacement. Instead of pushing space out of the way, you convince space to fold itself around your ship. It requires a completely different mathematical approach, So Young explained, looking at the alien device with something like pity. Your species is using pre-quantum physics. It works, but it is like trying to fly by flapping really hard instead of understanding aerodynamics. The energy requirements alone must be enormous, Jae-sung said. How do you power something like this? It would need more energy than most stars produce. Kale and his team were having a whispered conversation in their own language. The humans could not understand the words, but the tone was clear. The aliens were panicking. Perhaps we should move on to other matters, Kyle said finally. But we are not finished, Heejin said innocently. You wanted us to explain how it works. We have identified 17 major inefficiencies in the design. Would you like us to suggest corrections? No, Voss said quickly. Then more calmly, that is, we have learned enough for now. Tae-ho studied the alien ambassador's face. Kale was trying to look calm, but sweat was beading on his blue forehead. Is everything all right? Tae-ho asked politely. Of course. You have exceeded our expectations. Most species require several attempts to even identify the device's basic function. Well, it was not too difficult, So Young said modestly. The mathematical principles are fairly straightforward once you understand quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics? The study of how matter and energy behave at the smallest scales. It is basic physics. We have been using quantum theory for over a century. Kale's aide whispered something urgent in his ear. The ambassador nodded grimly. I think, Kale said slowly, that we need to return to our ship to consult with our superiors. This assessment has raised some unexpected questions. Of course, Tae-ho said. Should we prepare a full technical report on the device's design? Flaws? That will not be necessary, Kyle said quickly. As the aliens packed up their device, Voss leaned close to his superior. Sir, he whispered in their own language, they understand our technology better than we do. I know, Kale replied grimly. Send an emergency message to the fleet. Tell them we may have a Category 7 situation. The humans watched the aliens leave, their expressions polite but their eyes sharp. Well, Dongwoo said quietly. That was interesting. They are scared, Hyejin observed. Really scared. Good, Mina said. They should be. Tae-ho looked out, the window at the alien ship hanging in the sky. I think, he said slowly, that our friends are about to show us what they really came here for. That evening, Ambassador Kale sent an urgent message to the human team. His face on the video screen looked strained, and his usual calm confidence was gone. Dr. Tae-ho, he said, my superiors have reviewed your performance on today's assessment. They are impressed. So impressed, in fact, that they have authorized me to show you something very special. Tae-ho raised an eyebrow. Oh? Our ship's actual warp core, the real technology that powers our civilization. This is an honor granted to very few species. Mina and Tae-ho exchanged glances. After the aliens had left that afternoon, the human team had spent hours analyzing everything they had observed. The conclusion was troubling. We would be honored to see it, Tae-ho said carefully. Excellent. Please bring your 2 best technical experts. We will transport you to our main vessel. An hour later, Tae-ho, Dongwoo, and Dr. Bae Junho stood in the alien transport beam. Jun-ho was their systems integration specialist, a quiet man who saw patterns that others missed. As the light surrounded them, Dongwu muttered under his breath. I still say their teleporter uses too much energy. A properly designed quantum transporter would need half the power. The main alien ship was enormous inside. Corridors stretched, in every direction, filled with the hum of massive machinery. Their escort, Security Chief Voss, led them through sections that clearly were not meant for visitors. Impressive, is it not? Voss said, gesturing at the walls. This ship is over 2 kilometers long. It houses a crew of 10,000. Jun-ho looked around with interest. The artificial gravity system is interesting. Rotating sections? No, gravity. Generators. Ah, graviton manipulation. That explains the energy waste we detected. Voss stopped walking. Energy waste? Well, yes. Artificial gravity is useful, but rotating the ship would be much more efficient. Using graviton generators for something this large must require enormous power. It does, Voss admitted reluctantly. They passed through security checkpoints that scanned them with exotic energies. Guard stations where alien soldiers watched them with suspicious eyes. The deeper they went into the ship, the more it felt like they were entering a fortress rather than a diplomatic vessel. Your security is very thorough, Taeho observed. The technology we are about to show you is the most closely guarded secret in the galaxy, Voss said. Wars have been fought over lesser knowledge. Finally, they reached the ship's core. The chamber was vast, cathedral-like in its scale. At the center, suspended in a web of energy fields, was the warp core. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A sphere of impossible materials that seemed to bend light around itself. Energy coursed through crystalline structures that defied human understanding of physics. The very air around it hummed with power. Behold, Voss said with religious reverence, the heart of Zenthari civilization. This technology took our greatest minds 50,000 years to develop. Dongwu and Jun-ho walked around the chamber, studying the core from every angle. Their eyes were bright with curiosity, not awe. Fascinating, Jun-ho said. The energy matrix is much more sophisticated than the test device. But it is still using the same basic approach, Dongwu added, pointing at the energy flows. Brute force spatial displacement instead of dimensional folding. Voss blinked. What did you say? Your warp drive, Taeho explained patiently. It pushes space out of the way instead of working with space's natural properties. It is like swimming upstream instead of with the current. Look at this, Jun-ho said, pulling out a small scanner. The energy output is incredible, but most of it is being wasted on maintaining the spatial distortion. How much energy? Dongwu asked. Jun-ho checked his readings. About 47, times what should be necessary, maybe more. Voss was staring at them in shock. 47 times? At minimum, Dongwu said cheerfully. If you used proper dimensional folding theory, you could achieve the same result with a tiny fraction of the power. Your ship could be much smaller, much faster, and much more efficient. But this is impossible, Voss said weakly. This technology represents millions of years of development by the galaxy's greatest civilizations. Well, Taeho said diplomatically, it is certainly impressive, but the mathematical principles are not that complex once you understand the underlying physics. Jun-ho was now studying the core's control systems. These equations look familiar. Is this based on the work of someone called... He paused, trying to pronounce an alien name. Korthak the Brilliant, Voss said automatically. The greatest scientific mind in galactic history. His approach is interesting, but he made some fundamental errors in his assumptions about space-time geometry. Errors? Voss's voice was barely a whisper. Oh yes. Look here. Dongwu pointed at a section of the energy matrix. He assumed that space has a fixed structure that needs to be overcome. But space is actually quite flexible if you know how to ask it nicely. Ask it nicely. A figure of speech, Taeho said. What my colleague means is that space-time can be manipulated using quantum field resonance instead of brute force. Jun-ho nodded. It is like the difference between breaking down a door and finding the key. Both methods work, but one is much more elegant. Voss was now pale green instead of his normal darker shade. You are saying that our greatest achievement is primitive. Not primitive, Dongwu said kindly. Just inefficient. Whoever designed this was clearly very intelligent. But they were working without some crucial pieces of the puzzle. What? Pieces? Quantum mechanics, dimensional theory, unified field mathematics. Junho listed off casually. Basic stuff, really. Voss activated his communication device with shaking hands. He spoke rapidly in his own language, his voice rising with each word. Taeho caught enough to understand the general meaning. Voss was reporting to someone in authority, and he was very worried. Is there a problem? Taeho asked politely. No, no problem, Voss said quickly. I was just updating my superiors on your progress. But Taeho could see the fear in the alien's eyes. This had stopped being a simple technology demonstration. Something much more important was happening. Perhaps we should return to the surface, Voss said. You have seen enough for one day. Of course, Taeho agreed. Though if you would like, we could prepare a technical report on possible improvements to your design. That will not be necessary, Voss said quickly. Too quickly. As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Junho whispered to his colleagues. Did you notice the weapon systems? Hard to miss, Dongwu replied quietly. This is not a diplomatic vessel. It is a battleship. And the crew size is all wrong for peaceful exploration, Taeho added. 10,000 people on a ship this size suggests military operations. They were silent as the transport beam carried them back to Earth. But once they were safely in the UN building, the discussion began immediately. They are not diplomats, Mina said after hearing their report. They are an invasion force. But why the charade? Hyejin asked. Why not just attack? Because they wanted to assess our capabilities first, So Young said. They needed to know if we were a threat. And now they know, Junho said grimly. We understand their technology better than they do. Taeho looked out the window at the alien ship in the dark sky. Its lights seemed different now. Less welcoming, more threatening. They came here to judge us, he said slowly. To decide whether we were worthy of joining their empire or dangerous enough to eliminate. So what happens now? Dongwu asked. Mina was already reaching for her secure communication device. Now we prepare for war. But Taeho held up a hand. Not war. Something better. What? Taeho smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. We show them exactly what human engineering can accomplish when we put our minds to it. High above them, on the alien ship, Voss was delivering his report to Ambassador Kale. Sir, the humans are not what we thought. They understand our technology completely. They know things that our greatest scientists do not know. Kale stared at the planet below. How is that possible? I do not know, sir. But I recommend we implement Protocol 9 immediately. Protocol 9. The complete subjugation or elimination of a potentially hostile species. Kale nodded slowly. Send the message to the fleet. Tell them to prepare for Phase 2 operations. But neither of them knew that human satellites had already detected the incoming fleet. Or that deep underground, in facilities that did not officially exist, human engineers were putting the finishing touches on technologies that would make Zenthari warp drives look like stone tools. The test was over, and humanity had passed with flying colors. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for what came next. The emergency meeting began at midnight in a secure facility 300 meters below the Swiss Alps. Representatives from every major nation sat around a table that had been built for very different conversations. Tonight, they were not discussing trade agreements or climate change. They were planning humanity's response to an alien threat. Captain Park Mina stood at the head of the table, her laptop connected to screens showing satellite data from around the globe. The news was not good. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected 17 large vessels approaching the solar system, she reported. They will arrive in 72 hours. Each ship is larger than the one currently in Earth orbit. Doctor, Kim Tae-ho sat beside her, studying technical readouts on his tablet. Based on their energy signatures, these are military vessels, much more heavily armed than Ambassador Kale's ship. So we were right, said President Chen of the European Federation. This was never about diplomacy. The assessment was a test, confirmed Dr. Choi Hye-jin, who had spent the evening analyzing recordings of their conversations with the aliens. They were evaluating our technological capabilities to determine our threat level, and we failed their test, said General Yamamoto from the Pacific Alliance. No, Tae-ho said quietly. We passed it too well. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The aliens had not come to welcome Earth into a galactic community. They had come to judge whether humanity was advanced enough to be dangerous. What are our options? Asked Director Okafor of the African Union. Mina pulled up another set of displays. Militarily, we are outmatched. Their ships have energy weapons that could level cities. Their shields can deflect anything in our current arsenal. Current arsenal, Lee Dongwoo said from his seat near the back. That is the key phrase. All eyes turned to the engineer. He looked tired but excited, like a man who had been working on something important for a very long time. Dr. Tae-ho, would you like to tell them about Project Leap Forward? Tae-ho hesitated. That project was classified at the highest levels. I think, Mina said dryly, that an alien invasion fleet qualifies as a highest level situation. Tae-ho sighed and activated his tablet. New images appeared on the screens around the room. Technical diagrams, energy calculations, and photographs of installations that most of the people in the room had never seen before. For the past 15 years, Tae-ho began, a small group of scientists and engineers have been working on theoretical, faster-than-light travel. The project was shelved 3 years ago, not because we could not make it work, but because the energy requirements seemed impractical. Seemed? President Chen asked. We were thinking too small, Dr. Han So-young said, standing up from her chair. We were trying to build something that could carry a few people between planets. But when you scale up to ship-sized applications, the energy requirements actually become more manageable. Dongwoo activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. A three-dimensional image appeared, showing a sleek vessel that looked nothing like current human spacecraft. This is the HSV New Horizon, he said. Humanity's first faster-than-light vessel. We finished building it last month. The room erupted in surprised voices. General Yamamoto leaned forward, studying the hologram. Where is it? Hidden in an asteroid mining facility near Mars. Yoon Jae-sung answered. We have been testing it, in secret. Testing? Director Okafor asked. You mean it actually works? Better than works, So-young said with a grin. Yesterday it traveled from Mars to the outer edge of the solar system and back in 4 hours. The numbers on that journey were staggering. The alien ships, with their advanced warp technology, would take 3 days to make the same trip. How is that possible? President Chen asked. Different approach to the physics, Tae-ho explained. The aliens use massive amounts of energy to force space out of their way. We use quantum field manipulation to convince space to fold around our ship. It is the difference between swimming against a river and riding the current, Dongwoo added. Mina pulled up new displays. But one ship will not stop an invasion fleet. True, Jae-sung said. That is why we built 12 of them. Another eruption of surprised voices. Mina stared at the Korean engineer. 12 ships? Where? Hidden in facilities around the solar system. The orbital manufacturing stations, the moon base, the asteroid belt. We have been preparing for this possibility for years. What possibility? General Yamamoto asked. Hye-jin spoke up. The possibility that we were not alone in the universe, and that our neighbors might not be friendly. Tae-ho activated another display, showing energy readings from around Earth's solar system. We have been monitoring deep space for unusual signals for decades. 3 years ago, we detected patterns that suggested intelligent activity in nearby star systems. So you knew they were coming. We suspected that contact was possible, Tejo corrected. The Leap Forward project was our insurance policy. President Chen looked around the table. So what you are telling us is that humanity has secretly developed faster than light travel that is superior to alien technology. That is exactly what we are telling you, So Young said. And we have a fleet of ships ready to use it? Correct. And you built all of this without telling any of us? Dongwu and Tai Ho exchanged glances. We told some of you, Dongwu said carefully. The project had official backing from several governments, but it was kept compartmentalized for security reasons. Security, General Yamamoto said flatly. You mean you did not trust us? We did not trust anyone, Mina said bluntly, including ourselves. This technology is too dangerous to risk it falling into the wrong hands. And now? Director Okafor asked. Now we use it to defend our planet, Tejo said simply. Dr. Bei Junho, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. There is something else you should know. The aliens' technology is not just inefficient, it is stolen. What do you mean? The mathematical foundations of their warp drive are inconsistent, Junho explained. Different parts of their system use different approaches to the same problems. It is like someone took pieces from several different machines and forced them to work together. They did not develop this technology, Hyejin added. They acquired it from someone else, probably by force. The implications were chilling. If the Zenthari Empire was built on stolen technology, how many other species had they conquered? How many civilizations had they destroyed? So what is our plan? President Chen asked. Mina stood up, her expression grim but determined. We show them that humanity is not as helpless as they think. Our ships are faster, more efficient, and more maneuverable than theirs. We have weapons they have never seen before. What kind of weapons? Quantum torpedoes, Dongwu said. Gravity. Pulse cannons. Dimensional shields, things that make their energy weapons look like throwing rocks. But most importantly, Tejo added, we have something they do not have. Which is? Initiative. They think they are dealing with a primitive species that will either surrender or die fighting with inferior technology. They are not prepared for an enemy that understands their weaknesses better than they do. So Young pulled up a tactical display, showing the approaching alien fleet. Their ships are powerful but slow. They depend on overwhelming firepower rather than maneuverability. Against a properly equipped human fleet, they are sitting ducks. And if we lose? General Yamamoto asked. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Mina spoke. If we lose, then at least the galaxy will know that humanity did not go quietly. But we are not going to lose. How can you be so confident? Tejo smiled. Because we have been underestimated our entire history. Every time someone thinks they understand human capabilities, we surprise them. The Zenthari are about to learn why that is a very dangerous mistake. As the meeting broke up, the world leaders dispersed to their respective nations to prepare their people for what was coming. But the core team remained behind. 72 hours, Mina said, looking at the countdown on her display. More than enough time, Dongwu said confidently. To do what? To show the galaxy what human engineering can accomplish when we really put our minds to it. High above them, the alien ship continued its orbit around Earth, waiting for reinforcements. Ambassador Kale was confident that his fleet would make quick work of the primitive humans. He had no idea that humanity was about to rewrite the rules of galactic warfare. The next 72 hours would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of the entire galaxy. The Zenthari fleet arrived exactly when their calculations predicted. 17 massive warships dropped out of warp space at the edge of Earth's solar system, their hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Each ship was a kilometer long, built for intimidation as much as destruction. Admiral Keck stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's Fist, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The primitive world hung before them like a ripe fruit, undefended and helpless. Long range. Sensors detect no defensive installations, reported his tactical officer. No orbital weapons platforms, no military vessels above patrol boat class. Excellent, Keck said. Ambassador Kale's assessment was correct. This species has no significant military capability. On the surface of Earth, Dr. Kim Tae-ho stood in the command center deep beneath the Swiss Alps, watching the same tactical display. But his showed something very different. Human ships were positioned throughout the solar system, invisible to Zenthari sensors thanks to dimensional shielding technology. All vessels report ready, Captain Park Mina said from her station. 12 ships, full crews, weapons charged. Any word from the surface team? Tae-ho asked. Lee Dong-woo looked up from his workstation. Ambassador Kale is requesting an immediate meeting. He wants to discuss our surrender. How thoughtful of him, Dr. Han So-young said dryly. Should we accommodate him? Tae-ho considered this. The original plan had been to attack the alien fleet as soon as it arrived. But perhaps there was a better way to handle this situation. Yes, he said finally. Let us meet with the ambassador, but not where he expects. An hour later, Ambassador Kale stood in the same UN conference room where this had all begun. He was no longer pretending to be a diplomat. His robes had been replaced with military armor, and his escort consisted of armed soldiers rather than aides. People of Earth, he said formally, you are now subjects of the Zenthari Empire. Surrender immediately, and your species will be granted the status of protected servants. Resist and you will be eliminated. Tae-ho sat across from him at the same table where they had first discussed galactic cooperation. That is quite a change from your original offer of membership in the Galactic Council. The Council exists to serve the Empire's interests, Kale said bluntly. Your species showed dangerous levels of technological understanding. Such threats cannot be allowed to develop independently. I see. And what would happen to humanity under this protection? You would be relocated to designated worlds. Your population would be limited to sustainable levels. Your technology would be controlled to prevent further dangerous developments. Slavery, in other words. Guided development, Kyle corrected. For your own good and the safety of the galaxy. Dr. Choi Hye-jin spoke up from her seat. How many species have you guided this way? 43 civilizations currently enjoy our protection. They are much happier than they were when they tried to manage their own affairs. And the ones who refused your protection? Kale's expression hardened. There are no species who refuse our protection, not anymore. The room was quiet for a moment, then Tae-ho smiled. You know, Ambassador, there is something we wanted to show you. A small demonstration of human engineering. It does not matter what toys you have built, Kyle said dismissively. My fleet has the firepower to turn your planet to glass. Oh, we are not talking about toys, Dr. Bae Jun-ho said, activating a tablet. We thought you might be interested in seeing our approach to the faster-than-light travel problem. The room's displays lit up, showing the tactical situation around Earth. The Zenthari fleet was clearly visible, arranged in standard intimidation formation. As you can see, Tae-ho said conversationally, your ships are quite impressive. 17 vessels, approximately 1 kilometer each, total crew of about 30,000. Correct, Kale said warily. The energy signatures suggest graviton-based weapons and traditional particle shields. Very powerful, but rather predictable. Get to the point, human. The point, So-young said cheerfully, is that your fleet is surrounded. Kyle laughed. Surrounded by what? Your primitive chemical rockets? Dong-woo touched a control on his tablet. Suddenly, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. 12 ships, sleek and small compared to the Zenthari vessels, but positioned at strategic points around the alien fleet. Those readings are false, Kale said, but his voice was uncertain. Yoon Jae-sung, Tae-ho said to the materials engineer. Would you demonstrate our cloaking technology? Jae-sung nodded and activated another control. The human ships became visible to Zenthari sensors for the first time. The effect on the alien bridge crews was immediate and dramatic. Impossible, Kale whispered, staring at the display. Our sensors show nothing there. Dimensional phase shifting, Junho explained casually. We move our ship slightly out of normal space-time. Your sensors cannot detect us because we are not entirely in the same dimension you are scanning. Admiral Kex's voice came through Kale's communication device, speaking rapidly in the Zenthari language. Even without translation, his panic was obvious. Your admiral seems concerned, Mina observed. He wants to know how many ships you have, Kale said weakly. Just 12, Tejo said. We thought that would be sufficient for a demonstration. 12 ships against 17? Well, So Young said. We did not want to make it too unfair. Kale activated his communicator. Admiral, you are authorized to open fire. Destroy these vessels immediately. High above Earth, the Zenthari fleet began to move. Energy weapons charged, missile tubes loaded, and targeting systems locked onto the human ships. But when they fired, something unexpected happened. The human vessels simply were not there anymore. Where did they go? Admiral Kex demanded. His tactical officer stared at his instruments in confusion. Unknown, sir, they just vanished. Then the Dominion's fist shook as something struck its shields. Report. Unknown weapon type, sir. Very small energy signature, but it penetrated our shields like they were not there. More impacts. The human ships were attacking, but they were moving too fast for Zenthari targeting systems to track. They appeared, fired, and vanished again before return fire could reach them. How are they moving so fast? Kale demanded, watching the tactical display in horror. Quantum tunneling, Dongwu explained. Instead of traveling through space, our ships briefly exist in multiple locations simultaneously. We attack from wherever is most convenient. That is impossible. No, Tejo said patiently. It is just very difficult. The mathematics are quite complex. On the display, one of the Zenthari ships suddenly stopped functioning. Its lights went dark, its weapons fell silent, and it began to drift. What happened to the Conquest's pride? Kale asked. Quantum torpedo, So Young said. It disrupts the quantum bonds that hold matter together, very effective against ships that use traditional shielding. You are destroying my fleet. Actually, no, Mina said, checking her status reports. We are being very careful not to cause permanent damage. Your crews are unharmed. We are just disabling your ship's primary systems. Why? Because we want to make a point, not start a war. Another Zenthari ship went dark. Then another. The human vessels continued their impossible dance, appearing and disappearing, striking with surgical precision. Stop this, Kyle shouted. I order you to stop. You are not in a position to give orders, Tejo said quietly. In 20 minutes it was over. The entire Zenthari fleet hung dead in space, their crews alive but their ships completely disabled. Now then, Tejo said, turning back to Ambassador Kale. Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? Kale stared at him in shock. Our surrender? You came here to judge whether humanity was advanced enough to be a threat, Hyejin said. We think we have answered that question. But how? Kyle whispered. Your technology is impossible. Those ships, those weapons, the way they move through space, it defies everything we know about physics. It defies everything you know about physics, Junho corrected gently. But physics is much larger than what your species has discovered. So Young pulled up a new display, showing energy readings from the battle. Your ships use approximately 47 times more energy than necessary for faster-than-light travel. Your weapons are based on principles we abandoned 50 years ago. Your shields cannot stop attacks that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It is not your fault, Dongwu added kindly. Your species learned to copy advanced technology without understanding the underlying principles. But copying has limits. Tejo stood up and walked to the window. Above them, the first alien ship that had brought Kyle to Earth still hung in the sky. But now it seemed small and primitive. Here is what is going to happen, he said quietly. Your fleet will return to your home territory. You will inform your leaders that Earth is under human protection, not Zenthari control. They will never accept that. Then they will discover what the rest of your fleet just learned. Human technology is not just more advanced than yours. It is more advanced than anything else in this galaxy. Mina activated her communicator. All ships, prepare for escort duty. Our guests are leaving. Kyle looked around the room at the human faces. They were not angry or triumphant. They were calm, professional, almost sympathetic. You could have destroyed us, he said finally. Yes, Tejo agreed. But that would not have solved the real problem. What problem?